So I'm recording these a little different from usual. Normally I only make a video on just one thing, so there's no need to separate recordings. Not that I need to, I think, but in this case, since I am recording a video on two separate standalone works, I think it makes sense to record them separately, especially with how I'm watching them, because as of now I've watched Chimes of Midnight, or listened to them rather. I haven't listened to Spare Parts yet, and it's fresh in my mind, so I kind of want to talk about it now, rather than try and talk about both of them at the same time, since, I imagine they're going to be very different and standalone, in some ways, so yeah, I'll talk, I hope it's just not too jarring or confusing, as, there'll be, two non-spoiler sections, this one for Chime of Midnight, and then after I finish, it's going to be the Spare Parts non-spoiler section, and then it'll do the Chimes of Midnight spoiler section, and then Spare Parts for the end of the video. So hopefully I'm just hoping it works out, and just letting you know so you understand if it sounds a little weird or different, or I repeat things. I don't know, because it'll be a few days before I watch Spare Parts. So I guess full transparency, I have no experience with Doctor Who. I know things about it. I know the TARDIS. I know Doctor Who. I know that Daleks are an antagonist or something. I know it's a sci-fi thing, a time travel thing, obviously. It's British. I've seen, my brother showed me some of, I guess there was, the 2005 series on Netflix or something like that, and he showed me some of it because it was very, I don't know, just the way it uses, sound effects, and was, a little overdramatic, I guess, it was weird, but I only saw one scene of it really, and it was more like an episode, a cliffhanger ending thing. It was I don't know. And I did ask someone who did like Doctor Who, and they said it was part of the charm. So I'm sure if I actually tried to watch it myself, I'd probably I'd have more concrete thoughts. But it's just very little experience with Doctor Who, just a general knowledge of it, and I didn't need to have more than that for Chimes of Midnight. Doctor Who time traveler sidekick. That's all I really need, or immortal time traveler. Sidekick. That's all I really. And even then, they kind of explain that context relatively early on. So it's it's not a problem. But aside from not having a lot of context to Doctor Who, I also haven't listened to an audio drama before. I think I've listened to a bit of an audio book, and a book is obviously different. Well, this was a more informative nonfiction book, not a novel. Where obviously, if you're reading a novel, it has descriptions of what the characters are doing, what's their inner monologues, what's their thoughts and stuff. Where this was entirely told through dialogue, and it was even just the setup was they arrived in some dark place, and so they're using lots of descriptive language to kind of elaborate and set the scene of where they are. And there'll be sound design in it. It was pretty effective. I had very much had an image of my head of everything as it was happening. And sometimes I had to be maybe a little over descriptive to get across the scene. Oh, you're pointing a weapon at me, or something like that, right? Just something they wouldn't obviously say normally, or, maybe they would. I don't know these characters. Well, obviously there's only two characters who are from anything else, really, and the other characters are likely completely unique to this work, and likely don't show up in anything else, I assume. But, gotta say, this was fucking good. Chimes of Midnight. I can struggle to get through movies sometimes, and it was almost 2 hours long, and I was pretty much gripped the entire time. It's a mystery, murder mystery, you could say, but it gets cool and interesting and good, and it hits pretty hard. I didn't cry, but I did get a well of emotion at a certain point, and how much can I talk about without spoiling it? It's a murder mystery in a kind of, what's the word? They describe it's Edwardian era Britain, I think. So, very limited, time frame, so to speak, kind of. It's, because they even poke at the chronological thing, because they're time travelers from the future. So they have to, be aware of that as to avoid time paradoxes. But yeah, that's basically it. They arrive in a mansion, there's a murder mystery, and shit gets fucking wild. It goes into the classism of the era, there's the sort of master-servant relations, and that kind of ties into the overall conflict, and it's both an engaging mystery, but then with, the resolution is interesting and good, and I was yes, this is some cool, there were some parts where I'm like, what the fuck? Like when they reveal, there's like a big reveal, and it's like, oh fuck, what? And it's I'm not sure how much I can say without spoiling it. It's just like I don't know. I just found it a really gripping, interesting listen. Like the voice acting is good. The sound and music is good. Like I said, it was effectively, like, even without any like descriptive prose, so to speak, except for just the dialogue and sound design. I had a very clear image of what was going on, and yeah, it worked. It was good and interesting. Like, again, with virtually no context into Doctor Who, this was still really good. Is what's interesting to me, I guess, because as I understand it, Doctor Who is kind of like, there is ongoing stuff, but there are also a lot of like individual standalone things, and I suppose especially with these audio dramas that I'm only going to be listening to 2 of. So yeah, I don't know if I'll check out more, especially because apparently these are like to the person who recommended them to me. These are like their favorite Doctor Who pieces of media. Period. So I mean, like, that's a pretty high, that's a nice, solid bar to reach, right? So even if stuff is only almost as good as just Chimes of Midnight, then that's pretty okay. I still don't think I'll have any interest in going through anything else Doctor Who aside from, spare parts anytime soon. But it's like, okay, yeah, it's a setting that you can kind of do a lot of different things, I suppose, that, like, offers a kind of nice creative canvas to work with, I suppose. So yeah, moving on to the non-spoiler section of spare parts, if I have anything specific to say. Because, like, the problem with this is, like, it is a mystery. So, like, yep, there's these characters, and they're all servants, and, you get an idea of who they are, I guess. And then the mystery gets unfolded, and, who's the murderer? And it's like... like, what can I say? Because it gets too wild to just, like, not say anything. But anyway, so yeah, non-spoiler section for spare parts, if I have anything particular to say. Maybe I will, because, I don't know, maybe it's less of a mystery, I don't know. Anyway. So, spare parts, non-spoiler section, gotta say, I did not like that one as much as Chimes of Midnight. Like, I guess appeal-wise, I mean, it was more of like a horror thriller kind of thing, I guess. Maybe horror's a bit strong. I don't know. I don't really jive with horror in the first place. I never really have. So maybe that's part of why it didn't really grip me in the same way. It's also, like, very much kind of an origin story. Like, I did see some of the reviews on Goodreads where they have a whole... They log not just books, but also audio dramas and stuff, apparently, because I was able to log the Doctor Who stuff there. And there were just apparently the Cybermen are one of the major antagonists in the Doctor Who franchise. And again, I haven't touched the Doctor Who franchise. So, like, yep, sure are robot people. And I guess I saw some people mention a character who I don't know at all, who is, I guess, referenced. And I like, there's just a bit of context I'm missing in this one in comparison to Chimes of Midnight, which I felt like, Doctor Who is a reincarnating immortal time-traveling dude, and he's got a partner with him. And, like, that's all I needed to know for Chimes of Midnight. And for spare parts, I don't know if knowing more about the franchise would have helped me appreciate it more. But, I don't know. Like, it wasn't bad. I just, like, especially when Chimes of Midnight was so fucking good and interesting and gripping. And then spare parts was like, yeah, this is fine. Yep, I'm learning about this place and seeing all this stuff, or hearing all this stuff happen. And, there's a body horror kind of thing going on. And, the systemic oppression and just, like it is kind of funny because, like, it's very, anti, like, there's a line where the doctor mentions, is this spoilers? Yeah, I think I'm just gonna hold off on that until spoilers, actually, but, I don't know, those are really just, like, the 2 things that I think may have kept me from enjoying it more. One is just I'm not into spooky stuff, and the other being that I'm not as into Doctor Who, where this one was definitely leaning more on the franchise in general. Even just a little bit, like, it's an origin story, so it's like it's not necessary to know that, oh yeah, these guys are, like, recurring antagonists in the franchise. But there was definitely, I felt, maybe a level of, like, because they had a very specific voice. You know what, that was another thing compared to Chimes of Midnight, is, some of the accents of the side characters were a bit thicker, and then also they had the for the regular Cybermen, and their digitized voice, I was fine, but then there was the committee. and their voice was even more heavily digitized, and I could probably only understand like maybe 40% of what they were saying because it was just so heavily like garbled that like I could pick out words, and I was definitely supposed to be able to understand them based on like how but I kind of couldn't. So that might have also impacted some of my enjoyment. Is that like, oh yeah, here's like the main antagonists of the story. I can't understand most of what they're saying. It's my fault. But I, just let yeah. It's just funny to be like they're speaking English, but I don't understand it sometimes because it's fucking British English from like, these are old radio dramas from like the 50s or something. Which very much shows in one of the lines, where it's like, oh, are these the champions of the proletariat? And I'm like, are the Cybermen supposed to be like a communist allegory? Yes, communism, the only political structure that reduces its workers to cogs in a machine. So, like, that's what I mean by it shows, like, yes, capitalism, the liberation of the individual. Ha, 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 ha. Yeah, it sounds a little different 70 years later, I guess. I don't know when this was really aired, but, anyway. Moving on to spoilers. Or no, I guess I'm moving on to spoilers for Chimes of Midnight. Spoilery section for Chimes of Midnight. Holy fuck. Okay. So, like, I guess to talk about the conflict first is because, like, right, so it gets into the classes of the era. They're investigating the murder of Edith, a scullery maid, who is, like, the lowest on the totem pole in the servant class, who are already considered like low in the class hierarchy. Like there's the whole thing with the plum pudding, and it's like, oh, our plum pudding is smaller than the one going upstairs, even though there's way more people upstairs, or way more people down here. Like they're kind of dehumanized, and even when Edith dies, they're just completely dismissive of it. Like, oh no, we lost a scullery maid. That was a perfectly good set of hands to do chores on Christmas Eve. That's so horrible. Like, not the fact. Like, there's one part where the head cook, the cook, she's telling Mary to just do Edith's job and wash the dishes, and she's like, but there's a corpse down there, and the cook Powderly's like, kids today, like, she's just like, excuse me, like she just doesn't, what the fuck, like, just the dismissiveness of the fact that someone's just fucking dead and that no one cares. Because, these servants are, like, there's this whole systemic issue. And as it turns out, the culprit is kind of, I almost said personification, and it's not quite correct. But basically, like, the issues of the era sort of given, like, a form, in the form of a literal structure, right? Like, one arc is about this sort of power structure and dynamic between, the masters and the servants. Like, they even directly compare it to slaves at one point. Slaves are forced to obey, but a servant is willful, right? So that's, like, kind of ideal for a master because, like, they it's commented on, they don't have any ambitions or dreams. This is the best life I could ever get. I can't want for more. Even though, like, they're, poor conditions, destitute, like, oh, but I get to drive a nice car. I could never drive this car on my own, but working as a chauffeur, I can. And, like, it's so fucked. Like, even there's, like, like, the whole reason this is happening is because Edith committed suicide because the only person from that upper class who showed her kindness died. And that kindness was limited to, like, remembering her name and smiling at her once in a while. Like, this kindness meant so much to Edith that, she loved Charlie. And when Charlie died, she committed suicide. Like, this is her one, like, happiness in life, was being treated like a human being, which is where it's so fucked. And, of course, like, the fucking, Edward Grove is just, he's literally a structure, a house, I guess by making him male, he's even like, patriarchal, you could say, which is more happenstance. But I mean, like most of the servants were women, so that's interesting. Like I don't know a huge amount of British culture specifically, but it seems apt, especially considering the time period. And like as a structure, like it's literally so symbolic of this master servant relation that like it literally will die if it. What I can't if I treat these servants like humans and let them live their lives outside of this time loop. I'll stop existing and die. Like in order to live, it needs to dehumanize and use the servants like their tools, like their I am nothing, I am nobody. Which I guess gets to an interesting thing about how it uses like the language with the characters like repeating things other characters are saying. Like they're so dehumanized through the time loops that they've sort of like what's the word? Like mixed with each other, and like they're saying the same things, they're thinking the same things, like, oh, it wouldn't be Christmas without Botterly's plum pudding, or he must be the murderer, he's got shifty eyes. Like, and everyone has shifty eyes apparently, because everyone calls everyone else the murderer, citing the shifty eyes, and the doctor's like, if only it was so easy as to be able to find criminals by the shiftiness of their eyes. And it's like there is definitely a few little funny parts, sometimes darkly funny. Like when Batterly is found dead, stuffed to her stomach stuffed to plum pudding. Like someone still says, "Wouldn't be Christmas without her plum pudding." And it's like, what? She died from that pudding. She is dead because of that pudding. What the fuck? What are you saying? Like it's Jesus Christ. But yeah, like also as a sci-fi thing, it was kind of neat because it like touched on like the existential nature of Edward Grove's very existence. Like there's a part where like he's growing so fast in the time loop recently due to that he I think he says something like I was but a child when I tried to kill you, which in the time span of the drama it was literally like half an hour ago maybe at most. But he I consider you like my parents. Like the antagonist was perfect. Like when it gets to the fucking climax, and he's about to compress time until the moments that he's most alive at the expense of everyone else there. Removing their freedom to do anything in this time loop for eternity, pretty much. And the only way they can get out is by accepting life, right? Because it is dealing with Edith's suicide, and like suicide is a choice. And so, what's the only real good, thing you could say is that choose to live. And so they're able to talk, you do have that, you're not nobody, by showing this servant, humanity and letting her be human. She chooses to live instead of, dying as a result of these horrible systems that are, controlling her life. And they're able to undo the paradox, and it's good. And, when she chose her life, I got emotional a little bit, and I was like, yeah, this is fucking good. Yeah, and I guess it was also good the way the servants were, like, shitty to each other, sort of, like, finding control in their shitty situation by being able to use Edith as, like, the punching bag. Like, she's below them. They can punch down, right? Because they're already so low that that's, like, the only... Because they can't punch up, because they'll get fired. They'll lose this great job that they have. I guess to finish my thought earlier with the way Edward Grove kind of needs these servants to exist is like, again, as this sort of symbol of this master-servant relationship and these inherently dehumanizing structures, like, by recognizing, like, the human life within them, then the structures kind of have to be undone, right? Like they can't exist, like, they need dehumanization to exist. So, right, so once you recognize them and reject them, then they can't exist, which is why it was, like, it tied it together in this, like, really fitting way, I guess. Like, it was kind of, like, the perfect ideological rejection of that structure. That literal construct, you could say. Like, once they're like, oh my god, it's a house, and I was like, wait a minute, is it a house like this, master servant structure, this power structure? And then it's literally a structure. Like, yeah, and that's exactly where they went with it. And with Edward Grove, taking over and being just talking and literally, like, just some dialogue that just hammers it in, and I'm like, yes, give it to me. So yeah, I liked it a bunch. I don't know if I have much more else to say, but maybe I'll have stuff to say in comparison to Spare Parts, which again, at this point, like you've already heard me talk about Spare Parts a little bit. I haven't listened to it at this point. Again, these weren't recorded on the same day. But I don't know which one I like better because I haven't listened to both of them yet. So maybe I'll talk about it more alongside Spare Parts. So I'll leave you to that. So yeah, spoilers for Spare Parts. I guess the other thing I was going to mention was, aside from like the communist thing, is like there was more like, oh, now it's, what was it, breast implants and hip replacements, and then we're losing our human souls. Like there's very much a like the soul is tied to the body kind of thing. Anti-transhumanism, which again is interesting compared to like nowadays. Because technology has advanced so far where cybernetic limbs are just getting way better. Cybernetic eyes. Like I remember there's being like a video years ago of someone who had a cybernetic eye, and he was getting harassed in like a restaurant or something for like, oh, are you recording something? Like just fear of this new this new technology and these advanced cybernetic, like, and it was even, I think I saw it on 4chan, someone, maybe that was where, because someone posted it as like the first hate, not hate crime, I guess, but definitely like harassment of someone, and that's probably a bit much because obviously like people with disabilities get kind of shit on in general, but it was interesting to think about, especially because like, yeah, the setting is a place where it's hard to live without these cybernetic enhancements. There's very little food. They can't go on the surface of the planet. So they, can only survive by transcending humanity, which also means cutting off emotions, becoming cold, thinking, emotionless robots. Yeah. I mean, I didn't get much more of it out of that. It was just definitely like, it was neat. But especially like, yeah, I hate to be like, yeah, but compared to Chimes of Midnight, but also like Chimes of Midnight just kind of blew my socks off. I had no expectations for the audio dramas. Maybe I wish in retrospect, maybe if I'd listened to this one first, maybe I'd been like, oh, this is neat. Cause Chimes of Midnight was also my first real audio drama. So there was that level, like, I mentioned how it started with, feeling out the senses, where this one I felt like was a bit, slightly more difficult to be able to tell certain like elements of just the general like spatial and like the characters had distinct enough voices for the most part, but yeah, I think there were also more of them in this one, maybe not actually, I don't know. I definitely wish I'd enjoyed it more, but hey, it was fine. Again, not a complete, it's not like I wasted my time like, hey, I learned a bit more about Doctor Who, but I maybe I just wish there was more like Chimes of Midnight. Or maybe like that's the thing, maybe because to a lot of fans, maybe this is as good or better than Chimes of Midnight. It's just like regarding my personal tastes, it wasn't. So yeah, that's probably more like it. So or more likely the case. Yeah, I can't think of much else I have to say. So thank you for listening, and yeah.